Hey everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, November 30th of 2025. Now, we just are rolling to the end of not only Thanksgiving week, but the month of November of 2025 is over. Today is the last day. I don't need to tell you that, but this has been a really beautiful week of journaling for me because when you have a holiday that's on a Thursday like Thanksgiving, it's always one of my favorite holidays for a couple of reasons. I love that people start really flowing into gratitude and being grateful because it is really heightened. A day of thanks, a weekend of thanks. You think about your family, your friends, the blessings that you have. And then another layer for me is that we close a little early on Wednesday. And then me and my little team at Barlow Herbal, we take Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a lovely time off and we get to spend with our families. And I got a ton of journaling done this week. So lots of reflection that sometimes is well, most of the time for me, it's very, very important. And I think for the times that we live in and from my perspective, what I see, these times of reflection are super important. And I had some really interesting things come in. I'm just going to start sharing with you because it kind of rolled in to the whole idea of peace, love, and truth, and really how subjective or objective truth can be because of so many layers. And so I kind of ended on that theme. So let me kind of start with what I wrote here. So I wrote the last month of 2025, December is here, last month. And for me, this has been a year of big change and lots of, I hate to say karmic cycles because I believe that really karma is, you can choose to jump off the karma wheel. You don't have to play into that game. I do think that what goes around comes around. If you put out good, you're going to get good, if you take it that way. But there's a lot of things that have happened in my life. The last, probably since COVID, really, and in the last 2 years, and then in particular, I have never had a year like 2025. And, I've shared a tiny bit, but there's going to be a moment in time when I'm going to be able to open up and just share all the stuff that has happened in my life this year. So one of my sisters sent me this really beautiful, it was from a man that she didn't know who it was. It was anonymous, but she heard this man give this little, I release you with love. And I'm just going to quote this. This is not from me. This is from someone who was, I don't know if they were releasing a person or a situation. It seems like a person, but you can apply this to a situation, a relationship, a job. You can apply this to anything. And it was so beautiful that I copied it down in my journal because I wanted to go back and look at it. So this is the first thing that I thought, this might be really cool to share with you guys. So this is a quote. Listen, I love you, but I don't like what you do, and you're hindering me from going where I need to go. So I had to release you with love. I love you, but I release you with love. From all spiritual agreements, all spiritual contracts, all soul ties, and all energies that no longer serve my higher self. But I love you, but we go no further because just having that attachment is keeping me from being what I'm supposed to be. So that might not have been super smooth, but that felt, you need to look at everything that's in your life that does not serve your highest good. And this felt so it felt like something that was really an affirmation of a lot of the things that have, from my family, from situations, from even things in my business, things that no longer serve my highest good. They needed to be released. And we get to release them with love. And to me, this is where the whole piece of love comes in. We always say love conquers, love wins, love, and I think that was a really meaningful way for me to start my journal. I just thought, okay, that is really, really amazing. Okay, so then I wrote this. With all the things I know, see, hear, feel, what now? how do you truly find and experience peace? Because I think this is true for many of us who've been seekers of knowledge, wisdom, observation, awareness, spirituality, and there's all the things, right? So then I wrote this, you don't find peace. So I realized you don't find it. I wrote find in quotes. You don't find peace, you choose peace. And I think that's really what peace boils down to, right? Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's noisy, busy, chaotic, lots of people, no people, by yourself in your car. You can be in chaos and be peaceful. You can be in the midst of chaos. And I know many of you can relate to exactly what I'm talking about. And you can decide, you can choose to just be peace, right? And then I wrote, simple in theory, but it takes practice in truth. And that's where the whole truth came in. So I was like, okay, what is truth? So then I wrote this, truth. What is truth? And then I wrote, truth is higher than love. And there is all there is truth. Not all there is love. Okay, so think about that. And then I wrote, And that's when I wrote peace, love, and truth. So then I sat with that for a second. And of course, the way my brain works and all the things and all the rabbit holes and conspiracy theories and all the things that I've let into my awareness and let into my soul, my spirit, all the stuff, right? I kind of thought, well, truth is so subjective, right? So then I wrote my truths, things I know for sure. And then I wrote, ha, 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 because think about that very famous quote, the things I know for sure. That was made very famous by Oprah. And I had a small moment in time where I tuned in and I watched Oprah and I was inspired here and there with the things that she would say and the things that she would do and the guests she would have on and all of her generosity and philanthropy and pretty quickly I would say, I don't know, I probably watched her and followed her for about a year. I would watch her show and then I was like, this just didn't resonate with me. So when I wrote things I know for sure, it reminded me of Oprah. And I was like, okay, that is a whole nother thing based on, a lot of the things that have come out, right? So then I thought, okay, I'm going to look at this from a perspective of things that feel true in a type of a game or matrix type of situation. Because here's what I really believe we are in a simulation. We're in a matrix, right? And so when I go stand in the grass and I hug a tree, I get grounded, I go on a hike, I go on a walk, I look at the sky, I look at the clouds. This is a truth in the simulation. So you can take the truth. In fact, what I did, so this is what I did first. I looked up a bunch of quotes that I thought would be so perfect for this because truth is an individual thing because everyone's perspective is different and whatever, it's all such an interesting concept. So I found some truths on the difference between perspective and reality. Okay. So this first one is from Anais Nin. And this is, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Very famous quote. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, right? If we are love, we practice being in love and gratitude, we are going to look out at the world and the different things that happen from a lens of love. We can look at things from a lens of victimhood. Then everything that happens out there and we see is in a loop of victimhood, okay? And then from Friedrich Nietzsche, there are no facts, only interpretations. And then Marcus Aurelius, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. And then Alfred Korzybski, the map is not the territory. And what he means by this is our mental model isn't the world itself, okay? And then these quotes on subjective truth. And this is from Arthur Schopenhauer. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. And then this from unknown, but it's often attributed to Rumi. Your perception of me is a reflection of you. My reaction to you is an awareness of me. So beautiful. And then this is also from unknown. No one is actually the villain of their own story. And what this does is points to subjective, self-justifying truth. So no one is actually the villain of their own story. Interesting, right? So that's subjective truth. Now here's some quotes on objective truth. Truth is that which remains true, even if no one believes it. Okay, that was attributed to David Bohm, B-O-H-M. And then this one from Aldous Huxley, facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Perfect, right? And this from Philip K. Dick. He's the one who wrote Blade Runner and a whole bunch of other books. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored, which is almost the same as what David Bohm says, right? So this is what he said. Reality is that which, when you stop believing it, doesn't go away. So reality is that which, when you stop believing it, doesn't go away. Just because you stop believing something doesn't mean it's not true, okay? And then here's some interesting quotes I found on the relationship between subjective and objective truths. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. And this is Oscar Wilde. And then a paraphrase from Thomas Merton. The truth is not simply what you make it, it is what makes you. I love that. And then this, between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, most truth is lost. This is attributed to Khalil Gibran, someone I couldn't even pronounce their name perfectly. And then this paraphrased from Albert Camus. There are two kinds of truth, the truth that lights the way and the truth that warms the heart. Interesting, right? Because we are such emotional beings that we feel a truth that lands in our heart and we follow that because that feels like truth. And then there's truth that simply shines a beacon and our eyes see it, our intuition sees it, whatever that may mean. And then there are a couple of quotes I found on a mystical spiritual take on truth, which I think all of these are important to layer in. The moment you label something, you miss the truth. And this is a Zen teaching. The moment you label something, you miss the truth. Perfection. And now this is attributed to Lao Tzu. The moment, or when the mind is still, the truth reveals itself. This is why I believe journaling is so important, because you allow yourself to get still and just sit for a moment while the truth comes in from your higher self, a higher perspective. And it always lands for you. It's not landing for someone else, it's landing for you. When the mind is still, the truth reveals itself. And then this from Meister Eckhart, the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. And this is basically subjective truth and ultimate truth that collapse into one. That's how that's interpreted. And then the last bit of quotes I found are on psychological insights into truth, okay? Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. And this is Carl Jung. And then this one from Joseph Campbell. What is true for you in your private world may not be true for anyone else. And then this final one from Unknown. People don't believe what is true, they believe what feels true. You know, I thought those were so fascinating to bring out, because it's like there's such a massive amount of information and facts and what is truth. So there's so many interpretations, right? So then I thought, okay, let's take this from, like I said, an idea of this matrix, the simulation, and bringing our truth into this final month of 2025 and into what I believe is going to be a pivotal, fast-moving year for humanity. For each of us individually, you get to choose. You get to choose how this happens for you individually. You know, I don't know what's happening in each of your lives and all of the nuances of relationships and jobs and children and pets and how you see the world, and the things that you let affect you or not affect you. It's such an interesting time to be here, especially with access to information and our ability to discern and be aware, and to realize that there are so many people who don't have the ability to discern or be aware. Or I've realized that sometimes I can't even have a conversation with someone because they literally cannot hear me. And this has really been pretty apparent, especially since 2020. I realized that there's a glaze, there's really a disconnect there, and I'm sure that you have felt that too. And then you just kind of go, okay, there you go. So I wanted to take this from a perspective of the Matrix, because I think this is such a fascinating, kind of fun, and if we look at it as a game, it can really change everything. Because like I said a couple of weeks ago, I feel like if you can understand this about being in this game at a level where we have unlocked a really, really interesting level of the game. And there's a whole bunch of people on this earthly realm that are playing the game too, and they might be in a different level of the game. It's not saying they're less than, it is saying they are just in a different level. Okay, so this is the perspective that I wanted to take, and I actually jotted down 10 different things I thought were really, really kind of fascinating. Okay, so even if this world is simulated, this is a felt experience. Like I said, what I described, sitting in the grass, this is my avatar sitting in the grass, hugging a tree, whatever it might be that I'm doing that I love to do in nature. And this is a felt experience. There's a lot of things that you can do with a headset on, a virtual reality headset. And there are many people and athletes who will actually replay an event or a routine or a game they have to play over and over and over and over in their mind. And they can create what they can actually perform in the real world by the practice they have in their mind, because they're feeling it. They're feeling what it feels like to do it, to go through the emotion. So it's all so interesting. So this is a felt experience that is communication between the layers and the deeper consciousness of being a player. Okay, so here's an example. Think about how calm you feel when you're lying in the grass. Not because it feels magical, but because the game uses sensations, okay, like warmth, pressure, rhythm, and it reminds my consciousness what it feels like to feel whole in this avatar playing the game. Okay, so here's the truth, that this is my truth. These sensations are our deeper consciousness, and it's telling me this: you're here, you're real, keep going. Okay, that is my truth. When I go connect with Mother Nature, this is my truth in those moments. Okay, and it might be different for you. Okay, so the second one is on relationships, and I look at these. This is a really interesting way to look at this. Look at this as something that you're helping to debug the game. Okay, so in a simulation, other beings might not be others at all. They might just be reflections, like a mirror, okay? So here's an example. The person who triggers you most is the one whose presence activates something that's unresolved. Like if you look at a relationship that way, any relationship, your boss, your sister, your child, your spouse, whatever relationship, you're like a multitude of friends, which from my experience, my friendship base has tightened down to a very, very tiny number. Okay, so we need to look at these relationships, whatever they are, whoever they are, as a simulation, like a mirror. Okay, so here's where I land on with this truth. Every relationship is a message from yourself to yourself. Okay, and it comes disguised as another person. Okay, so that's the truth. That's my truth in this simulation with these relationships. This is honestly a message from myself to myself. Because if I spend time in a relationship that's not congruent anymore, I am just reflecting. And it becomes actually really beautiful to release and allow space for new to come in. Okay, so then I thought about synchronicities, because when you start to pay attention to the synchronicities that are in this game, they're everywhere. And I think that this is partly, from my perspective, what allows you to unlock different levels and different rooms and different coins and all kinds of things, right? So if the world is a simulation, then coincidences are more meaningful. Okay, so here's an example. You think about someone and they call you. Okay, you ask for a sign, and the same phrase will appear 3 or 4 times during the day. You know, this, what's been happening for me weirdly the last couple of months is I will go to look at my phone for the time, and it's either 7:11 in the morning or 7:11 at night. Now I look at my phone for the time other times during the day too, but that number shows up, and I forget exactly what it means, but there's a meaning behind the number 7:11. It's so interesting to me, and so to me, these are messages. These are not necessarily coincidences, and if you really pay attention, there are so many beautiful synchronicities. Okay, so here's where I landed on where synchronicities feel like truth for me. So this might be the simulation's way of reminding you, you are not separate from the system. While we are here in the simulation, we are not separate from it. Our consciousness is part of the higher source, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. But while we're here in this avatar, we're not separate from it. We are part of it. That's why things like plants and herbs heal us. That's why the placebo effect is so powerful. That's why the nocebo effect is so powerful, because we are a part of this simulation. We are not separate from it. It's like we're not separate from our fellow humans. We might be working our way through this game different from each other, but we're not separate from them. We're connected. We're all so connected. I can't tell you how many times, if I want to talk to one of my sisters, I will simply think about them. And within typically a few minutes, it might take an hour, I'll get a phone call from them or a text from that sister. And I have a huge group of sisters. I'm one of 9 girls, and I have 5 brothers. And the same thing happens with my brothers. I'm close to one of them in particular, and I will think about him, and he will literally send me a text within a few minutes. It's so amazing. So amazing. So to me, this is reminding. These synchronicities are reminding us that we're not separate, okay? And then this one is to me one of my favorite. And I think that it's important to bring this in. So beauty is evidence of the intelligence of the entire simulation. You know, this is something I talk about on a regular basis, because you can look at things through a lens of beauty if in any situation that you want. You can look at the silver lining of something really hard that happens for you, and you can see the beauty in it. And then you have the pure physical beauty of a sunset, a sunrise, a sleeping baby, or maybe a crying baby. Any baby is beautiful, from my perspective. So here's what I wrote about this. Here's an example, okay? You feel awe looking at the stars, not because they're physical objects, but because they're such beautiful images. They're just, you know, you look at a sunset. Sunsets take my breath away, as do sunrises. You know, and for some people, the moon takes their breath away. Or the changing colors of the leaves on the trees literally can take your breath away. Okay, so beauty is a fundamental signature of the consciousness that built the matrix. This whole thing that was coded and built, and this might sound woo-woo and crazy, this whole thing, maybe not, for those of you who are watching, probably feel the same. This to me is a signature. It's a fundamental signature that we're not just here to learn the lessons and remember who we are and all that stuff. We're here to enjoy ourselves. We're here to look at the beautiful, this beautiful matrix that is created and appreciate it and experience it and revel in it, right? So here's the truth I landed on about beauty. All of these aesthetic experiences, it feels like these are breadcrumbs that are left by the person who designed all this, or the consciousness. And I don't know what exactly that is. I have some ideas, but to me, this is a breadcrumb. These are breadcrumbs to remembering who we are and why we're here, okay? And then this, the inner stillness feels like this is a way for us to access a deeper consciousness. I want to access that deeper part of me, and this has been a really beautiful journey for me to access that higher piece of myself, because I'll tell you, when you get quiet, this is why having a journal is really important, because then you can actually jot these things down. You go back and it's a reminder. It drops right back into you, just like it did when it first came in. Okay, so here's what I wrote about this, because I think this is so beautiful. Meditation is like stepping outside of this physical avatar. Okay, that's what it feels like. And I feel like it accesses like the root level of awareness behind it. We're accessing something at the root level when we meditate. And meditating is really, really interesting for some people, because they can't quiet their mind enough. And it's just a practice. It's just a simply practice thing. You just practice. And it's not about perfection. Everybody drops into meditation how they do it. And it's just coming back to your body, coming back to yourself. When your mind leaves and wanders, you just bring it back. And for me, I bring it back to my breath. I take a nice big full deep breath in with a 4 count and out with a 4 count when my mind starts to wander, when I'm trying to be still. Okay? So when I work on being still and in just a quiet meditative state, you don't have to do this for very long. I would say set aside 5 minutes or 90 seconds, whatever you've got during the day. Step into the bathroom, step into a closet, step outside, go stand next to a tree if you can. Ground yourself and get still, right? So here's an example. When you drop into deep stillness, time feels different, because time's a construct anyway. Time feels different when you're there. And everything about who you think you are, your identity, your ego, all of that dissolves, okay? And what happens in those still moments is your awareness expands. It's beautiful. So here's where I landed on with the truth for this. Silence is the portal through which me as the player remembers that I am not the character. I'm not the ego, I'm not the identity. I'm playing a character who walks through this world, this lifetime, and all the things that I get to experience and do and bring out to humanity is still a character. It's a character that I'm playing. And I will tell you, this is a really hard one for people to release, because we let what makes us us, we think what makes us us, rule everything about tapping into our higher self. Sometimes that goes out the window, because you can't, your ego is so fragile, your identity that you hold so dear. What if all that went away? Who would you be? That, to me, let me say that again. Silence is the portal through which the player, the avatar, me, remembers that I'm not the character. I'm really not this character. Okay, so then this. Emotions are the physics of the inner world. Okay, our emotions are everything. If you know people who have a lot of emotional maturity and stability, it's usually hard won. I don't think most people who have that are born with that. I think there are people who do have that when they come in, but I think most of us, we have to graduate into emotional maturity, emotional stability, all of those things. So here's what I wrote. Even in this game, this simulation, emotions are real, okay? They're just measured differently. They're more measured in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, quantum entanglement. Because you can change your emotions on a dime. You can watch a sad commercial or a happy commercial, and you might cry or feel completely elated, all in one moment to the next. Okay, so here's an example. Gratitude can elevate our experience, not because of a chemical reaction, but because the simulation is coded that way. Okay, so think about this. when you are in high frequency states, you can unlock different levels of whatever you perceive. Your perception of the simulation changes, okay, when you can unlock these different levels of emotional states, okay? So here's the truth I landed on for this. Emotional states are the true physics. This is really where physics lands for me. Matter, all this matter, this is just the visual. This is the visual, like an overlay. It's an overlay of the simulation. Okay? Okay, so then this to me is intuition. Okay? Intuition is our guidance system. If you look at this as a game, as a simulation, you get that intuition either in your chest, you feel a tightening, you feel something in your gut, you feel an overwhelming, something is right, something feels off. This is our guiding system, and this has been really programmed out of us on purpose. And we know that by all the things that calcify our pineal gland. Aluminum, Wi-Fi, glyphosate, these fluoride, these things calcify our pineal gland, that little gland that sits in the middle of your brain. That's your connection. It's like your antenna. So your intuition and your connection to your higher self, this has been programmed out of us. So here's an example. You feel pulled toward a path or a direction with no logical explanation. There's nothing logical about some of these things and this guidance that we get from our intuition. And we later find out exactly why we needed to do that. Okay, so here's where I landed on with this truth. Okay, intuition is simply the breadcrumb trail back home. Our intuition is just guiding us back to home base, back to where we're going to land after we leave this simulation. Because I don't know if you've seen any of the work and the information from Isabella Green. I think some of you probably have. I attended a little workshop that she did back in January of this year. And it was just a one-day workshop she held in Sedona. I went with my niece, and she has spent some time where she can take her consciousness out of the simulation, not just this earthly realm, out through the astral realm, the different dimensions, and up into what she calls the void, which is just where you are part of God, part of consciousness. And it's pretty cool. And to me, that feels real to me. So to me, these different intuitive hits that I get, just for me personally, these feel like breadcrumbs that are taking me back home and a remembering of who I am, right? Okay, so then this. And this is number 8 of 10, okay? So to me, death is just like logging out of the game. You've just logged out. I think as human beings in this physical body, what we are most afraid of, because we've been conditioned and programmed to believe, is to fear death, to fear it. And I think for a lot of people, it's the pain of death. I know it was, and I've said this many times, it was for my mom. That was her biggest fear. And death is really just logging out. This feels like a truth to me, okay? So here's what I wrote about that. Even in this simulated world, death makes sense as the end of the current mission or the storyline. Okay, death makes sense. And then I believe there's, multiple lifetimes, and we're told that we have to go back and do better, and we haven't finished our mission, and then we get our mind wiped. We go in and we have no clue. So to me, I want to log out of this particular incarnation, and I want to be connected back with divine source, and then play. I want to go and play with all this fun experience I just had on this planet in this amazing simulation, right? Okay, so here's an example of what I believe is death is just logging out of the game, okay? Near-death experiences, what they do is they describe, think about this, profound clarity, peace, and a sense of awakening from a dream. Over the years, I've listened to tons and tons of near-death experiences. And I've kind of reached a point where they don't really resonate as far as tuning in and watching more of them, I believe they are very, very, very real. I believe these people experience these, they come back changed people, and most of these people end up doing a lot of good and helping humanity wake up to the remembering of who we are, right? So that's an example. And here's the truth I landed on when it comes to thinking of death as simply just logging out of the game. Death is not an ending, but the player just removing our headset. We're just taking off our virtual reality headset. That feels like truth to me, right? I personally don't want to die a painful death. I'm like every other person. I don't like pain, but I am not afraid. I am not afraid of death. And it's, my intuition will say, I've twice in my life, I've not gotten on an airplane because my intuition said something feels off. And there were not tragic things that happened with both those flights. They were just, one had to land early and one had to land at a different place. And the other one, the flight was delayed along the way, and neither one were dangerous situations. They were highly inconvenient situations. But I listened to my intuition, and I didn't do that. So that's what I feel about the end of this lifetime, is we're just logging out, okay? Now, the next one is about our dreams, because I am a person who has very vivid dreams, and I remember them. And this is, again, I remember them not only because I'm so lucid when I'm dreaming, but then I jot things down afterward, and I just kind of write things in my journal. In fact, when something really, during this past year especially, something really intense will happen in some of these situations that I've been working myself through, something really intense will happen that I know is going to affect something. I know this is super vague, but I will have a really vivid dream about it that night. Not something that I on purpose, but then it will change the way I will walk through the next few days until this thing happens, because I get these lucid dreams. So here's what I wrote about that. I think that dreams, they take us into different realities or different part of the simulation. So dreams could be when our avatar, our body, is offline, but the consciousness keeps going. Okay, and it's what I think is happening is exploring what is the backside of the matrix or the coding. Like, I think we're exploring what's out there. All of us have access to this information. This is like there's a lot of people who have a lot more access to astral travel, all of the things that your consciousness can go experience. And I think it's just learning the techniques, learning the breath work, and then practicing. And then what's supposed to come in for you will come in for you. So here's an example. When we encounter symbols, beings, or different lessons that feel more real than actually walking through this life. Okay, when you get these things in dreams, sometimes they seem so real. And I'm sure there's been times I've woken up from a dream so relieved that it was a dream. And then there's been times I've woken up from a dream like disappointed that it was just a dream. But it gives me some ideas of what's possible on both sides of the spectrum. So here's the truth that I landed on. The dream world might be the developer of the reality. I think we can look at it as developing the code. We get these dreams, and now we get to make different decisions based on what comes in for us while we're dreaming. That is so cool. So then the very last thing, because this feels like the deepest truth for me, the I, not the ego I, not the identity I, but the I, the I that makes me me, okay? So this is what I wrote. The sense of I am as the one thing that can transcend this simulation or game, okay? That's the one thing that feels like truth to me, that this can ascend whatever this is. And we all have gone into these different things that feel congruent to us. I mean, you look at the whole spirituality realm, you look at the whole religious thing, you look at the things that people embrace, and I think it takes us outside of the I am. It takes us, you embrace the identity of a religion or a thought process, in spirituality that's not you, that is taking you away from what feels like absolute truth, is the I am. Okay? So here's what I wrote about this. Everything in this matrix changes. Our bodies, our stories, our environment, even the different universes, okay? Everything can change, right? But the sense of being aware never changes. Just the awareness, like that just feels like truth. So here's an example. Our identity shifts, our beliefs shift, our lives shift, okay? All these things shift, but the fundamental I am, it remains untouched. It's untouched, okay? So here's the truth I landed on, and this is how I'm going to end this. The I that knows experiences is not in the simulation. Okay, so the I that knows all these experiences is not in the simulation. The simulation is in the I am. That is where it all lies. And this is to me a simple concept, a simple truth that kind of lands in me. This was an interesting week of journaling for me, and it felt like the perfect way for me to roll into a month of a crazy year for all of us. I got a Thanksgiving text from a very, very, very dear friend. In fact, this is my dearest friend, Stephen Ozanich, who wrote The Great Pain Deception. I've talked about his work. I've interviewed him 6 times and it's on this channel on a playlist. And we text each other here and there, check in and see how each other's doing. Back when I first found out about his work, it was in 2014, so about 11 years. I immediately knew that this was a person who not only did I need to connect with on a friendship level, but I needed to spread his message of how the body heals and how the body expresses pain when we have emotional pain. But anyway, he reached out, he always does on holidays, and just wished me a happy Thanksgiving. And I wished him a happy Thanksgiving back. And this is just on a text. And then he said that he was grateful this year was winding up because it was the roughest year of his life. And so it's like this, I know that I'm not experiencing this myself. I know that this has been a really pivotal year for many, many people. And my hope is that you can take every single tough situation, life-changing things that have happened in your life, not just this year, but in the past, and find a beautiful silver lining and come back to that knowing of the I am, not the ego-based I, not the things that make your identity here on this simulation matrixy game, not that, but just the I, just you who you are. I would say roll into 2026 with that awareness just intact and ready for the next adventure as the year rolls out. I'm excited for December because so many big things are wrapping up, and I'm so, at this point, so grateful for these silver linings and the way that I can put my perspective on something that sounds so horrific and make it into something so good and so beautiful. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. Looks like I went 43 minutes, not as long as last week, but thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. I'd love to know, what is it you're excited about in 2026? I don't typically ask for comments, and I'm not really asking for a comment. Really, journal on some of the things that are your truths. And maybe if you think my truths are kind of wacky here and there, I'd love to know too. But thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you have a brilliant rest of your Sunday and a beautiful first week of December. And we will see you next time.